The discovery of America by Christopher Columbus in 1492 is perhaps one of history's most widely promulgated and disingenuous fallacies. Not only is it now generally acknowledged that Norse Vikings discovered the continent nearly 1,000 years before Columbus, but there also exists strong evidence indicating that certain ancient civilizations, such as the Egyptians and Phoenicians, had also visited America in the distant pre-Columbian past. Besides all of this, the bones of red-haired giants unearthed in both South and North America point to the obvious truth that the Native Americans were not the first to inhabit the New World. Whereas the controversies concerning the discovery of America are well known, what is not well known is the controversy concerning the naming of America. In public school, we are erroneously taught that the Americas were named after Italian explorer and cartographer Amerigo Vespucci. The term America, we are told, is derived from the Latin version of Vespucci's first name, Americus. This fallacy was bolstered by one primary source, Waldseemüller's 1507 world map entitled Universalis Cosmographia, drafted by German cartographers Martin Waldseemüller and Matthias Ringmann. The map was the first to assign a name to the New World, America, which historians have proffered as proof that the continent was christened after Vespucci, since he held more firmly to the growing consensus that this was indeed a new world, and not the Indies, as Columbus believed. However, unbeknownst to most, Vespucci was not named Amerigo until after the naming of the New World on Waldseemüller's map, as writer Jan R. Carew records. Alberigo Vespucci and I deliberately use his authentic Christian name, a Florentine dilettante and rascal, corrected Columbus's error. Vespucci declared that what Columbus had indeed stumbled on was a new world. Alberigo was undoubtedly a Florentine dilettante, and an extraordinarily clever one. Why would he otherwise have changed his Christian name after his voyage to the Americas? In other words, writes author Steve Quayle in his book True Legends, the New World wasn't named after the mapmaker, but rather the mapmaker Vespucci named himself after the New World, and his friends and historians then claimed that the Americas were named after him. One of those claims came from a Florentine bishop of the time who boasted in a letter, "And well may our new world be named America, since its discovery was due to our eminent countryman, Amerigo Vespucci." This singular line from the bishop's letter has been touted by historians as proof that America was named after Vespucci. But aside from changing his name to match Waldseemüller's map, there are many other compelling arguments against America being named after Amerigo Vespucci. For starters, even if they had intended to name the New World after him, it is highly unlikely that Waldseemüller and Ringmann would have used Vespucci's first name instead of his last, as historian Alexander Del Mar notes. Had there been any intention to name the continent after Vespucci, his surname would have been used, so that the result would have been something like Vespugia instead of Ameriga. In short, there seems to be very little room to doubt that the world has been misled through the complimentary notice of the Florentine bishop who claimed the New World was named after Vespucci. What many American historians fail to mention or realize is that Native Americans have always had their own name for the New World. Historian Alec Locker elucidates. Children in America are taught that America came from Amerigo Vespucci, the Florentine mariner. Actually, the best evidence dating back to the earliest Spanish documents following Christopher Columbus shows that part of South America, from Venezuela to Peru, was called América by the Indians of that region. At least that is what the Spaniards understood. Various spellings of América occur in Spanish documents, beginning with the visit to that land by Alonso de Ojeda, with whom Vespucci sailed in 1499. Ojeda reported that he received friendly treatment at the hands of the Indians of Maracapana. Maracapana was also written as Amaracapana, the place where Columbus landed during his voyage past Trinidad and the Orinoco River a few years before Ojeda. Apparently, the Indians called the general area Amaraca, and Pana meant country or region. Later visitors to the western regions of South America found that the Incas called their region Amaruca. It seems plausible that Waldseemüller labeled that area of the New World America, not in hone of Amerigo Vespucci, but following the Spanish name derived from what the Indians call that part of the world. America, the continental name, also derives from an Indian word. Long before Europeans began making maps of the New World, the Native Americans called their land Amaracapana, or Amaraca for short. The spelling used today, writes Steve Quayle in True Legends, appears to have resulted when English explorer Sir Walter Raleigh wrote in his journals describing the New World as the beautiful valley of Amariochapana in 1595. A year later, Raleigh changed the spelling a bit more when describing Peru as all that tract and valley of America situated between the rivers Orinoco and Amazon. It is clear, then, that America was never named after or even by any European at all, but is an adaptation from the natives' own term, Amaraca, or alternatively, Amaruca. The spelling and pronunciation of the term was simply modified for European tongues, but its meaning remains the same. The meaning of Amaruca can be deduced by examining the name of the last ruler in the bloodline of the Inca emperors, Tupac Amaru. Tupac Amaru led the final insurrection against the Spaniards in Peru from the last stronghold of the Incas in Vilcabamba, but was summarily defeated and beheaded. His name holds the key to understanding the true connotation of the word America. Steve Quayle explains. Tupac was an Incan royalty title which meant one who glows or one who shines. Amaru means serpent, Quetzalcoatl. Additionally, Amaru in the Incan language also has connotations of being a serpent connected to the subterranean or underworld. In his acclaimed work, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, Manly P. Hall, quoting Theosophist author James Morgan Price, confirms the esoteric connotation behind the word America. These children of the sun adore the plumed serpent, who is the messenger of the sun. He was the god Quetzalcoatl in Mexico, Cucumats in Quiche, and in Peru he was called Amaru. From the latter name comes our word America. Amaruca is literally translated land of the plumed serpent. In order to fully grasp the implications of America, land of the plumed serpent, we need to explore the oldest religion on earth and its connection to the mythology of the three greatest civilizations that once existed in the Americas: the Mayans, the Aztecs, and the Incas. Stay tuned for part 2 of this analysis. Reporting for SteveQuayle.com, I'm Timothy Alberino, and that's my analysis. In part 1 of this analysis, I presented the contention that the continent of America was not named after Amerigo Vespucci, as historical orthodoxy maintains, but in fact derived its name from a variation of the native term Amaruca, which translates land of the plumed serpent. The objective now is to identify what or who this plumed serpent represents. In order to do this, we need to turn to the mythology of the three great empires that once dominated the Americas: the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca. There are many similarities between the cultures of these three civilizations, especially in relationship to their societal constructs, architecture, technological development, pagan practices, and pantheon of deities. Among the gods of the Maya, Aztec, and Inca, one entity in particular is nearly identical in all of its attributes: the great plumed or feathered serpent. To the Maya, he was Kukulkan; to the Aztec, Quetzalcoatl; to the Inca, Viracocha and Amaru. The worship of the serpent or dragon was not exclusive to the Americas, but ubiquitous throughout the ancient world, and most often associated with heliolatry, the worship of the sun. In her enormously influential work, The Secret Doctrine, infamous occultist Madame Blavatsky elucidates. The tradition of the dragon and the sun is echoed in every part of the world, both in its civilized and semi-savage regions. It took rise in the whisperings about secret initiations among the profane, and was established universally through the once universal heliolatrous religion. There was a time when the four parts of the world were covered with a temple sacred to the sun and the dragon. But the cult is now preserved mostly in China and the Buddhist countries. We find A, the priests assuming the name of the gods they served; B, the dragons held throughout all antiquity as the symbols of immortality and wisdom, of secret knowledge and of eternity; and C, the hierophants of Egypt, of Babylon, and India, styling themselves generally the sons of the dragon and serpents. The ancients living in the great civilizations of antiquity were not stupid. Contrary to contemporary notions, they did not literally worship the sun and the serpent, but instead the philosophy and deity they symbolized. The sun and the serpent are oftentimes depicted together in correlation with one another because they represent the same thing, one in a material sense and the other a metaphysical sense. Just as the physical sun enlightens the earth and makes telluric life possible, so the spiritual serpent enlightens mankind and guides him into eternal life. Just as the sun rises and sets anew, so the serpent sheds its skin anew, an allegory of resurrection. Above all, the sun and the serpent signify enlightenment and apotheosis, the tree of knowledge, pointing irrefutably to one notorious character. Then the serpent said to the woman, "You will not surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened. In the occult, the sun and the serpent, or dragon, are direct references to Satan, that serpent of old, as the Bible calls him, and Lucifer. Originating in the Latin Vulgate translation of the Bible, the name Lucifer is a derivation of the Latin term for light-bearer, resulting from the words lux, meaning light, and ferre, to bear. Thus, the sun is an appropriate symbol for Lucifer, as affirmed by renowned Sovereign Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, Albert Pike. Lucifer, the light-bearer, strange and mysterious name to give to the spirit of darkness. Lucifer, the son of the morning. Is it he who bears the light? and with its splendors intolerable, blinds feeble, sensual, or selfish souls? Doubt it not, for traditions are full of divine revelations and inspirations, and inspiration is not of one age, nor of one creed. In accordance with occultic tradition, the plumed serpent gods of the Maya, Aztec, and Inca all symbolized enlightenment, resurrection, and eternal life. Additionally, they were all associated with the dawn and the morning star, Venus, the very same analogy attributed to Lucifer in the book of Isaiah. How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning! How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations. The term weakened the nations in this verse does not imply that Lucifer caused the great civilizations of the world to be weak militarily, politically, or technologically, but rather morally, leading them into gross sin and rebellion against God through the shedding of blood, sexual depravity, and idolatry. But in the traditions of the occult, the influence of Lucifer in society is viewed inversely. In other words, he does not weaken the nations, but enlightens them. Ultimately, the consequences of Lucifer's enlightenment are always the same: bloodlust, tyranny, and death. This is certainly indicative of the Maya, Aztec, and Inca, all of whom are infamous for human sacrifice. The plumed serpent deities Kukulkan, Quetzalcoatl, and Viracocha were not just worshipped as distant and impersonal gods, but were actually credited with the founding of their civilizations and the intimate dissemination of secret knowledge. In fact, each of these entities is said to have lived among his people for a time, teaching them the occultic sciences and mysteries before departing over the sea. Unbeknownst to most, behind the veneers of these plumed serpents are the faces of bearded white men. Kukulkan, Quetzalcoatl, and Viracocha were not only alike in serpent form, but also in human form. Though the legends concerning them are manifold and inconsistent, these plumed serpent god-men are most often described, in stark contrast to their native subjects, as being tall, white-skinned with golden beards and hair, and blue or green eyes. Whereas Viracocha was said to have emerged from the depths of Lake Titicaca on the border of Peru and Bolivia, Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl came over the sea from a distant land, a land that was destroyed in a great flood. Amarumuru, the first plumed serpent priest-king in the legends of the Inca, was said to have arrived by passing through a stargate called the Gateway of the Gods, from the land of the gods, which had been destroyed in a great flood, bearing in his hands the mystical solar disk of their sacred temple. Like Viracocha, he too was of white complexion with blonde hair. It is precisely because the Aztec and Inca were expecting Quetzalcoatl and Viracocha to return from over the sea that the Spanish conquistadores, with their Caucasian bearded faces and advanced technology, were at first received and venerated as gods, a fatal mistake that would ultimately lead to the total annihilation of both civilizations. The question now arises: who were these plumed serpent god-men that founded the Maya, Aztec, and Inca civilizations? And where did they come from? There are many speculations. To the skeptic, they are little more than the fancy of primitive myth, probably derived from contact with European missionaries who visited the Americas in the Middle Ages. Other more intrepid minds contend that they were humanoid aliens from the Pleiades star cluster, and some believe that they were ascended masters from the ethereal plane, even Jesus Christ. Although I cannot say for certain exactly who they were, I believe that the origin and nature of the plumed serpent god-men can be distilled from the legends concerning them. Similarities in their appearance and Caucasian features suggest that they are of a common, non-indigenous race, or perhaps even the same person. The antediluvian narrative of a great flood and giants appears in all of their mythos. Kukulkan, Quetzalcoatl, and Amadu Muru are said to have come from a land that was destroyed by the flood. All of them founded their respective civilizations, bestowing their cultures with science and technology unknown to Europeans of the time, such as extremely accurate cosmological models and calculations impossible for human beings of the time to ascertain. All of them established a Luciferian cult based primarily on the worship of the sun and the serpent, requiring copious amounts of human blood. Aside from these clues, all of the plumed or feathered serpent deities of the Americas were associated with the wind and flight. There exist many legends among the natives of both South and North America concerning the white-bearded gods that flew through the air on disc-shaped craft. Although legends are notoriously unreliable sources of hard information, embellished with analogies and metaphors, common threads found in the narratives of widely dispersed people groups can often be traced back to substantive fact. It is my postulation that the plumed serpent does not represent a literal depiction of Maya, Aztec, and Inca deities, but a symbolic one, pointing to Lucifer, and to a secret priesthood of highly advanced beings from antediluvian descent, the sons of the dragon, as they are called in the secret doctrine, the keepers and teachers of the Luciferian lie. The nature and purpose of the plumed serpent cult should be of particular interest for those of us interested in Bible prophecy, since in Revelation 13 we read, "They worshipped the dragon, who gave authority to the beast." Contrary to popular belief, the worship of this ancient dragon is not a relic of the primitive past, but a biblical certainty of the imminent future. And it will begin anew in the land destined to usher in the Luciferian age, the land of the plumed serpent. Stay tuned for the next installment in this series. Reporting for SteveQuayle.com, I'm Timothy Alberino, and that's my analysis. In the last episode in this series, we explored the legend of the most renowned and ubiquitous deity in the great civilizations of pre-Columbian America, the plumed or feathered serpent, from whom the very name America is derived. We also discussed the correlation between the worship of the serpent or dragon and heliolatry, the worship of the sun. As noted previously, the arcane devices of the sun and the serpent represent essentially the same concepts, enlightenment, knowledge, and apotheosis, and are both indicative of the same person, Lucifer. It can also be said that, esoterically speaking, the sun itself is enlightenment, and the serpent its keeper and giver. The plumed serpent deities of the Maya, Aztec, and Inca, known as Kukulkan, Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, and Amaru, were often portrayed in human form and in stark contrast with their native subjects, having the appearance of tall, white-skinned men with golden beards and hair, and blue or green eyes. These mysterious god-men were said to have come from over the sea, bearing with them secret knowledge from the land of the gods, a highly advanced pagan civilization that worshipped the sun until it was destroyed in a great flood. Each of the civilizations that the plumed serpents allegedly founded in the Americas, namely the Maya, Aztec, and Inca, were indeed in possession of peculiar knowledge they could not have attained on their own, such as incredibly accurate cosmological models and projections, impossible for human beings of the time to ascertain. And each of these civilizations was based on a complex and bloody system of paganism, revolving around the worship of the sun. Could it be that Kukulkan, Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, and Amaru were survivors of an antediluvian race whose land was destroyed in the great flood of Noah? Could it be that these mysterious plumed serpent deities were in fact exiles from the lost city of Atlantis? This notion might at first glance appear to be biblically unsound, since in the 7th chapter of Genesis, God himself declares to Noah, "I will destroy from the face of the earth all living things that I have made." However, if we analyze these words carefully, we can infer from them the scope of annihilation designated in the Great Flood. First, we can determine that the flood was localized to the face of the earth. Second, we can determine that the purpose of the flood was to destroy all living things that God had made. But what about entities that might not have even been on the earth at the time of the flood? Living things that God had not made. Is such a thing even conceivable? In order to determine the plausibility of this scenario, two questions must follow. 1. Was there technology in existence before the flood that could have enabled anyone or anything to escape? 2. Were there living things in existence before the flood that God had not made? I believe the answer to these questions are biblically self-evident in the 6th chapter of Genesis, wherein a race of hybrid giants was created through illicit sexual intercourse between angels and human females. In the apocryphal Book of Giants, discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls, we learn that these fallen angels, or watchers as they are called, not only procreated with women to produce hybrid giants, but also with hundreds of other animal species to produce a diverse host of hybrid monsters. These angel-human and angel-animal hybrids would have inherited some of the superhuman capabilities of their angelic fathers, such as superior strength and intellect, as well as extrasensory faculties. In addition to genetically inherited capabilities, the preeminent offspring of the angels, namely the giants, were taught forbidden secrets by their fathers, secrets concerning sorcery, astrology, astronomy, pharmacy, cosmetology, metallurgy, meteorology, and geology. At first, these sciences might have been employed to produce primitive implements for industry and war. But considering that the fallen angels descended to the earth in the days of Jared, according to the book of Enoch, and that from Jared to the flood of Noah more than 1,000 years transpired, as reckoned in the Septuagint, plenty of time was afforded the antediluvian hybrids to develop advanced technologies, even far surpassing those of our 21st century. Keep in mind that before the Industrial Revolution, the world was still primitive, technologically speaking. Within 100 years, mankind went from riding in horse-drawn carriages on the cobblestone streets of antiquated cities to traversing the surface of the moon in dune buggies and building space stations in orbit around the Earth. It is essential to understand that the hybrid offspring of fallen angels were unsanctioned and illegitimate life forms. In other words, they were living things not made by God. It is my hypothesis that the hybrids of the pre-flood world, under direct tutelage of their angelic fathers, had indeed developed a level of technology that could have enabled some of them to escape the great flood of Noah. Perhaps the best evidence of this stupendous claim is to be found in the timeless legend of Atlantis. The legend of Atlantis was not invented by Walt Disney. The story of the rise and fall of both the city of Atlantis and the great Atlantean Empire has been passed down in one form or another through the oral traditions of many diverse cultures all over the globe. Though the names and details may differ from one people group to another, the common thread of a technologically advanced antediluvian civilization that was destroyed in a great flood can be traced through nearly all of them. The most famous and detailed account of the fabled Atlantis comes down to us from the 4th century BC in the form of Plato's unfinished work, Critias. In the Critias, Plato recounts a dialogue between Solon of Athens and an old Egyptian priest of the goddess Neith, Athena to the Greeks, in the district of Sais. The tale, which was of great length, began as follows. I have before remarked in speaking of the allotments of the gods, that they distributed the whole earth into portions differing in extent, and made themselves temples and sacrifices. And Poseidon, receiving for his lot the island of Atlantis, begat children by a mortal woman. He also begat and brought up 5 pairs of male children, dividing the island of Atlantis into 10 portions. He gave to the firstborn of the eldest pair his mother's dwelling and the surrounding allotment, which was the largest and best, and made him king over the rest. The others he made princes, and gave them rule over many men and a large territory. And he named them all. The eldest, who was king, he named Atlas, and from him the whole island and the ocean received the name of Atlantic. According to Plato's account, Atlantis was ruled by 10 kings, whose father was a god, but whose mother was human. What Plato does not reveal is that these 10 hybrid kings of Atlantis were giants. The Egyptians were not the only civilization to keep a written record of Atlantis. The mystery schools of the Far East have long concealed a secret knowledge of the once great empire that existed in the old world before the flood. In her voluminous work, The Secret Doctrine, Theosophist Helena Blavatsky translates the following stanza from an ancient Tibetan manuscript called the Book of Dizion. They, the Atlanteans, built great images 9 yatis high or 27 feet, the size of their bodies. What we have in the story of Atlantis is at the very least an allegory of the antediluvian world order, the old world order, in which the fallen angels distributed the whole earth into portions among themselves, and became each the god of his own realm, appointing his giant hybrid sons as divine kings. The allegorical nature of the story of Atlantis can be further discerned in the following remarks by late Masonic philosopher Manly P. Hall. The Critias first describes the blessed state of the Atlantean people under the benevolent rulership of 10 kings who were bound together in a league. These kings were monarchs over 7 islands. 10 kings bound together in a league, is the subject of biblical prophecy concerning a final world empire that will arise before the end of the age. 7 and 10 are both numbers signifying the domain and authority of the dragon and his beast in the book of Revelation. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great, fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. Geographically speaking, the earth is divided into 7 divisions of land, or continents. The 7 islands of the Atlantean Empire serve as a symbolic representation of the 7 continents of the earth, and therefore of world dominion. Atlantis epitomizes the old world order, in which the gods mingled themselves with the seed of men, and generated hybrid offspring to rule the earth. What is most intriguing is that the coming new world order, like Atlantis, may in fact also be ruled by 10 hybrid kings. This Atlantean scheme seems to be predicted in the 2nd chapter of Daniel, in which King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream of a great statue, the head of which was made of gold, the chest and arms of silver, the midsection of bronze, the legs of iron, and the feet of iron mixed with clay. The statue's compartmentalized sections, cast in distinctive metals, signify 5 world empires that would arise before the end of the age. The last of these empires, depicted in the feet of the statue, has 10 toes, which, like the 10 horns of the dragon and the beast, represent 10 kings that will rule the earth at the end of the age. But these are not 10 ordinary human kings. The feet and the toes of the statue are made of iron mixed with potter's clay. Potter's clay is often used as a metaphor for the human race, since, in contrast with heavenly beings, man was formed in the hands of God from the substance of the earth, just as a potter forms his clay. But now, O Lord, you are our Father, we are the clay, and you are potter, and all we are the work of your hand. The analogy of iron mixed with potter's clay in the feet and toes of Nebuchadnezzar's statue is twofold. First, it represents a fractured kingdom. And whereas you saw the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as you saw the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. But the iron mixed with clay analogy does not stop there. It continues. And whereas you saw iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. The second meaning of iron mixed with clay, in the context of Nebuchadnezzar's prophetic dream, is that the 10 kings of the final world empire, as prefigured in the 10 kings of Atlantis, will be hybrids of some kind. And the same can almost certainly be said of the citizens of their kingdom, since not just the toes, but all of the feet are comprised of iron mixed with potter's clay. Perhaps the mark of the beast, which will be compulsory for the citizens of his empire, will have more to do with genetics than microchips, more to do with bearing the genetic markers of his image within one's genome than merely bearing an external mark on the right hand or forehead. It is my opinion that Atlantis is an emblematic depiction of the antediluvian Old World Order, and a prophetic harbinger of the coming New World Order, which will reinstitute the Golden Age, when the gods mingled themselves with the seed of men, and hybrids walked the earth. But it is also my opinion that apart from being symbolic, Atlantis was also an actual city and empire, as further detailed in Plato's Critias. According to ancient lore, Atlantis was but one of many contemporary civilizations existent in the antediluvian world, all of which ultimately annihilated one another with advanced weapons of war, in what can only be described as the ancient equivalency of the doctrine of mutual assured destruction during the Cold War. In truth, the civilizations of hybrids that existed at the end of the pre-flood age, the days of Noah, were far more technologically advanced than we could ever imagine. In fact, to some degree, what we have fancied as visions of the future in our movies and television shows such as Star Wars and Star Trek could perhaps be more accurately considered visions of the distant past. The theme of advanced technology in the antediluvian world is a vast and voluminous subject with many proofs, which I will not even begin to explore in this analysis. But there is one form of ancient technology that we need to consider within the context of our current narrative: Vimanas. In short, the word Vimana refers to the flying machines of ancient India, but it is also used as a general designation for all flying craft of the antediluvian world. There are many accounts of ancient flying machines throughout history, but none as detailed as the records preserved in the Sanskrit writings of ancient India describing Vimanas. In an article entitled Flight Path, which appeared in the Times of India on the 8th of April 1999, journalist Mukul Sharma wrote the following. According to some interpretations of surviving texts, India's future, it seems, happened way back in its past. Take the case of the Yantra Sarvasva, said to have been written by the sage Maharshi Bhardwaj. This consists of as many as 40 sections, of which one, the Vaimanika Prakarana, dealing with aeronautics, has 8 chapters, 100 topics, and 500 sutras. In it, Bhardwaj describes Vimana, or aerial craft, as being of 3 classes. 1, those that travel from place to place. 2, those that travel from one country to another. And 3, those that travel between planets. Of special concern among these were the military planes whose functions were delineated in some very considerable detail, and which read today like something clean out of science fiction. For instance, they had to be impregnable, unbreakable, non-combustible, and indestructible, capable of coming to a dead stop in the twinkling of an eye, invisible to enemies, capable of listening to the conversations and sounds in hostile planes, technically proficient to see and record things, persons, incidents, and situations going on inside enemy planes. Know at every stage the direction of movement of other aircraft in the vicinity. Capable of rendering the enemy crew into a state of suspended animation, intellectual torpor, or complete loss of consciousness. Capable of destruction, manned by pilots and co-travelers who could adapt in accordance with the climate in which they moved. Temperature regulated inside. Constructed of very light and heat-absorbing metals, provided with mechanisms that could enlarge or reduce images and enhance or diminish sounds. The ancient Indian records of Vimana flying craft were not just wild concoctions of the imagination, like the folklore of American tall tales, but dealt with advanced scientific concepts such as electromagnetism, gravity, and mercury vortex propulsion. Author David Hatcher Childress elucidates. The ancient Indians themselves wrote entire flight manuals on the care and control of various types of vimanas. The Samara Sutradhara is a scientific treatise dealing with every possible facet of air travel in a vimana. There are 230 stanzas dealing with construction, takeoff, cruising for thousands of miles, normal and forced landings, and even possible collisions with birds. Traditional historians and archaeologists simply ignore such writings as the imaginative ramblings of a bunch of stoned ancient writers. After all, where are these vimanas that they write about? Perhaps they are seen every day around the world and called UFOs. Indeed, the descriptions of vimanas in the Sanskrit texts of ancient India are very similar to the anomalous flying saucers and cigar-shaped craft that people have been reporting for decades. According to ancient lore, both the Rama and Atlantean empires of the antediluvian world were equipped with Vimana aircraft and employed them in a great war with nuclear bomb-type weaponry that wrought terrible destruction. Before you take the position that the notion of such advanced flying craft and weaponry existing in the ancient world is poppycock and unbiblical, consider the words of King Solomon. That which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which it may be said, "See, this is new"? It has already been in ancient times before us. As previously stated, it is my hypothesis that some of the hybrid creatures from the advanced civilizations that existed in the antediluvian world were in fact able to escape the flood of Noah by means of technology, such as Vimana aerial craft. My hypothesis affords the possibility that some of these hybrids may not even have been on the planet while the earth was covered in the deluge, and would not have had anything to return to after the waters subsided, thus making them exiles, so to speak. The old world order of the antediluvian age was demolished in the wrath of God. The giants were enticed to war against one another until their whole race was annihilated. After being forced to witness the total destruction of their beloved children, the fallen watchers, who had genetically corrupted all flesh on the earth, were bound with chains and cast into the darkness of Tartarus. But before God wiped the genetic slate of the earth clean by destroying all living things that he had made, a seed bank of pure animal stock was preserved to reseed the earth after the flood, as well as a seed bank of pure human stock in Noah, his 3 sons, and their wives. And yet, somehow, hybrid giants re-emerge on the stage of the post-flood world, though of a lesser caliber than their predecessors. Perhaps a hybrid breeding program was initiated, similar to the phenomenon of alien abductions and artificial insemination occurring in our own times. I posit that after the flood, Lucifer adopted the exiled hybrid races as agents of his own designs, emissaries of deception, and ministers of the Luciferian doctrine. These agents are perhaps best recognized in the Plumed Serpent godmen that taught the natives of the Americas to worship the light of Lucifer, and bequeathed them with forbidden knowledge from the antediluvian world, secrets from Atlantis. Indeed, the esoteric mystery schools have dubbed these agents of enlightenment with the fitting titles of sons of the dragon and serpents. Whether or not my hypothesis concerning these exiles from Atlantis is true, what is incontrovertibly true is that the occult orders and secret societies have long been laboring toward one universal plan: to build a new Atlantis and pave the way for the coming of the man of sin, who will resurrect a new world order like a phoenix from the ashes of the old world order, and usher in the return of the gods to commingle with men in the new golden age. Now the last age by Kume's Sibyl sung has come and gone, and the majestic roll of circling centuries begins anew. Justice returns old Saturn's reign, with a new breed of men sent down from heaven. Only do thou, at the boy's birth in whom the iron shall cease, the golden race arise. Befriend him, chaste Lucina, 'tis thine own Apollo reigns. He shall receive the life of gods, and see heroes with gods commingling, and himself be seen of them, and with his father's worth reign o'er a world. Assume thy greatness, for the time draws nigh, dear child of the gods, great progeny of Jove. See how it totters, the world's orbed might, earth and wide ocean, and the vault profound, all see, enraptured of the coming time. It is the United States of America, the true land of the plumed serpent, that has been chosen to be the new Atlantis and bring about the fulfillment of this pagan prophecy. Stay tuned for the final episode in this series. Reporting for SteveQuayle.com, I'm Timothy Alberino, and that's my analysis. Since the time of the great flood, in the days of Noah, there has never been a nation like America. Never, in all of human history, has a kingdom arisen with such power, wealth, and influence as the United States. Within 200 years from the day of its founding, America ascended to the summit of supremacy, towering above every other nation on earth, with a military armament twice that of all other nations combined, and an economy that controlled the world. Was America's incredible rise to supremacy merely coincidental? Was it providential? One thing is for certain. This land of the plumed serpent was chosen long ago to be the trestle board of an ancient plan. The key that unlocks the mystery of America's secret destiny is a name: Francis Bacon. Sir Francis Bacon, without a doubt, is one of the most enigmatic personalities of the modern era. Born in London at the height of the English Renaissance on the 22nd of January, 1561, Bacon would himself become a Renaissance man of the highest caliber. Before his death on the 9th of April, 1626, this one man, within 65 years, would literally define the methods of modern science, as well as the parlance of modern English. But perhaps most significantly of all, he would chart the very destiny of what was to become the United States of America. Aside from his many exploits in science, philosophy, and literature, Bacon was a powerful statesman and parliamentarian, holding many titles during his illustrious career, including Attorney General, Lord Chancellor of England, Viscount of St. Alban, and Baron of Verulam, among others. He was also a favored courtier and close advisor of both Queen Elizabeth and her successor, King James. Dubbed the father of modern science, Francis Bacon has been hailed by many, including Thomas Jefferson, as one of the most influential men in all of human history. But behind the public veneer of this brilliant man lie dark and demonic shadows. Ironically, Francis Bacon is widely considered within the academic community to be the archetype of empiricism and practical thinking. And yet, if truth be told, this father of modern science can also be rightly considered the father of modern esotericism. It was most likely Bacon who coined the phrase, "knowledge is power." But what escapes those who employ this axiom is that the knowledge which Bacon valued most was not empirical knowledge, as they suppose, but rather esoteric knowledge. In other words, secret knowledge is the source of true power. It is no wonder, then, that Bacon himself claimed to be in possession of such secret knowledge, which he attained by his own admission through intercourse with demons. Among his many affiliations with the occult, Francis Bacon was a master Kabbalist. Kabbalah is the Jewish branch of the ancient mystery schools, and like the other branches, its prime objective is the perfection and deification of man. In a word, Luciferianism. For Bacon, the empirical material sciences were merely facilitators of the greater esoteric metaphysical sciences through which secret knowledge could be attained via contact with superior spiritual beings residing outside of the physical plane, beings through whom he claimed to have received the inspiration of his life's work. In order to veil this intercourse with demons from the vigilant eyes of the Roman Catholic Church and political adversaries, he concealed his occultic practices within the sanctum of secret societies, most notably the shadowy brotherhood of the Rose and Cross, the Rosicrucians, of whom Bacon was chief. In fact, there is reason to believe that Francis Bacon was the protege of notorious wizard Dr. John Dee, who was a close friend and advisor to Queen Elizabeth, and the deviser of a new brand of sorcery he called Enochian angel magic. Aside from being a sorcerer, Dee was a respected mathematician and astronomer, as well as a leading expert in navigation who trained many of the explorers that would conduct England's voyages of discovery. Dee was also a prominent figure within the Order of the Rose and Cross, and was most likely the Order's Grand Master, before passing the torch to Bacon. There are many peculiar stories surrounding the lives and times of both John Dee and Francis Bacon, which are in themselves highly intriguing. But what is most relevant to this analysis was their shared conviction that the legendary empire of Atlantis would rise again in the very land that is now called the United States of America. Dee and Bacon not only shared this conviction, but also labored under the guidance of non-human intelligences to make it so. Before his death in 1626, Bacon wrote a bizarre novel entitled New Atlantis. The book would not be published until 1627 by Bacon's personal secretary, William Raleigh, and never in its entirety. The traditional story holds that Francis Bacon was unable to finish the novel before his death, but many of the initiated brethren believed differently, including Manly P. Hall. The New Atlantis was first published in 1627 as a kind of appendix to the Silva Sevarum, a natural history in 10 centuries. On the title page is a curious design. It shows the figure of an ancient creature representing time, drawing a female figure from a dark cavern. The meaning is obvious. Through time, the hidden truth shall be revealed. This figure is one of the most famous of the seals or symbols of the Order of the Quest. Contained within it is the whole promise of the resurrection of man and the restitution of the divine theology. It is well known among the secret societies of Europe that the second part of the New Atlantis exists. It includes a description of the great room in Solomon's house, wherein are displayed the crests and the coats of arms of the governors of the philosophic empire. It may be for this reason that the writings were suppressed, for these crests and arms belong to real persons who might have been subjected to persecution, as Sir Walter Raleigh was, if their association with the secret order had been openly announced. The New Atlantis is a fictional narrative, but with a non-fictional plot, that may have served as the codex, the very blueprint for the formulation of the government of the United States of America and the esoteric organization that would control it from behind the scenes. In many ways, the New Atlantis is a manifesto of the secret society, a public confession, though concealed in a parlance perceived only by the initiated, concerning the construction of a utopian Christian society that would be ruled by a pagan philosophic priesthood, a priesthood dedicated to the doctrine and execution of the Luciferian agenda. The following is a brief summation of the New Atlantis. The story begins with a group of seafaring Europeans who set out on a voyage from the shores of Peru, but after being swept up in wayward winds, are driven far from their intended destination to the shores of an uncharted and mysterious island, whose name, they are told, is Ben Salem, or Son of Peace in Hebrew. The seafarers soon discover that Ben Salem is a utopian Christian society governed by an order of philosophic priests called the Society of Solomon's House, which house or college, my good brethren, is the very eye of the kingdom. After a lengthy tale of how Ben Salem came to be a Christian nation, involving an ark as an Ark of the Covenant, the Apostle Bartholomew, the Bible, along with some extra-biblical texts, and the apostolic sign of tongues, the European strangers are briefed about the old world, the time when Atlantis reigned supreme, and the civilizations of the earth were higher and nobler, possessing secret knowledge and advanced technology. It is revealed to them that Atlantis was what they knew as America, and that there were also great and mighty kingdoms in Mexico and Peru associated with Atlantis. Finally, after much fanfare regarding the chaste and pious society of Ben Salem, one of the Europeans is afforded a rare audience with an esteemed father of Solomon's house, whose pomp and regality is described in great detail. What follows is a comprehensive briefing of the many technological wonders of Ben Salem. Remarkably, the technologies listed on the final pages of Francis Bacon's early 17th century work read like a prophetic forecast of things to come. They include, but are not limited to, deep underground facilities 3 miles down, skyscrapers half a mile high, wind and water turbines, artificial atmospheric devices, electrical devices, genetic labs, industrial manufacturing, lasers, powerful telescopes, spectacles for the eyes, magnifying glasses, audio amplification, including headphones, advanced firearms and missiles, flying machines, submarines, and holographic projections. After being briefed on the technological wonders of Bensalem, as well as the function of some of the secret agents of Solomon's house, a very telling admission is made. And this we do also. We have consultations. Which of the inventions and experiences which we have discovered shall be published, and which not? And take all an oath of secrecy for the concealing of those which we think fit to keep secret, though some of those we do reveal some time to the state, and some not. What Bacon's New Atlantis truly depicts is a pseudo-Christian society governed by Rosicrucians. In fact, later editions of the book included the subtitle, The Land of the Rosicrucians. The entire narrative of the New Atlantis is replete with Christian jargon, mingled with the language of the mystery schools. This mixture of Christianity with the mysteries is the calling card of the Order of the Rose and Cross, and subsequently of every secret society that has branched out of them, including the Masonic Order. The very emblem of the Rosicrucians, the Rosy Cross, is a flagrant declaration of both their objective and their mode of operation. The cross, usually positioned behind or beneath the rose, represents Christianity. However, the rose, in its varying configurations, signifies the mystery religion. The mystery religion, kept secret by the serpents, the sons of the dragon, since the days of Babylon, and revealed only to the elite among the initiated, is nothing more than the doctrine of Lucifer, combined with the forbidden knowledge of the fallen watchers, first disclosed to their wives and offspring in the pre-flood age. The teachings of this arcane knowledge have since been divided and compartmentalized among the many mystery schools around the earth, including the secret societies of the West. Through the blending of Christianity with the mystery religion, acolytes of the mystery schools, shrouded in a veneer of Christian piety, could operate in secret and without fear of persecution. Also, by infiltrating the hierarchies of Christian institutions, the whole sway of Christian doctrine, practice, thought, and culture could be manipulated and eventually controlled by Luciferian handlers. The idea of a new Atlantis did not begin with Bacon's book. Since the destruction of the old Atlantis in the age before the great flood of Noah, there has ever been a secret plan to reinstitute the old world order in which the gods mingled themselves with the seed of men, and their hybrid offspring ruled the earth. As explained in the previous episode of this series, Atlantis symbolizes this old world order. Thus, the building of a new Atlantis is the inaugural procedure for the inception of a new world order in which the gods return. The adepts in the higher degrees of the mystery schools, both past and present, have always understood this occult principle and have ever been laboring since the beginning to bring about its accomplishment. In his book, The Secret Destiny of America, late Masonic philosopher Manly P. Hall makes it abundantly clear that America was chosen long ago as the site for the rebuilding of Atlantis and the reinstitution of the old world order under the guise of universal democracy, the new world order. Believing this to be so, I dedicate this book to the proposition that American democracy is part of a universal plan. Thousands of years ago, in Egypt, the mystical orders were aware of the existence of the Western Hemisphere and the great continent which we call America. The bold resolution was made that this Western continent should become the site of the philosophic empire. One of the most ancient of man's constructive ideals is the dream of a universal democracy and a cooperation of all nations in a commonwealth of states. The mechanism for the accomplishment of this ideal was set into motion in the ancient temples of Greece, Egypt, and India. So brilliant was the plan, and so well was it administrated, that it has survived to our time and will continue to function until the great work is accomplished. As Hall indicates, the discovery and colonization of America did not happen by chance. It was part of an ancient plan to build a philosophic empire, a new Atlantis, a plan whose time had come to fruition in the 17th century and whose agents of implementation would be the Rosicrucians under the direction of Francis Bacon. It is well known that Bacon, along with his influential fraternal brothers, directed much of the colonization of America, as Hall confirms. Bacon quickly realized that here in the New World was the proper environment for the accomplishment of his great dream, the establishment of the philosophic empire. It must be remembered that Bacon did not play a lone hand. He was the head of a secret society, including in its membership the most brilliant intellectuals of his day. All these men were bound together by a common oath to labor in the cause of world democracy. Bacon's Society of the Unknown Philosophers included men of high rank and broad influence. Together with Bacon, they devised a colonization scheme. This colonization scheme of Bacon's included capturing one of the most coveted occultic locations on the planet, the 77th meridian west, known as God's longitude, upon which Washington, D.C. would later be constructed. It was most likely fellow Rosicrucian and subordinate in the order to Bacon, Sir Walter Raleigh, who accomplished this task. When once the east coast of America had been thoroughly scouted by Bacon's men, and the important locations secured, Rosicrucian and later Masonic agents were sent in earnest to begin the colonization of the New World. Bacon's secret society was set up in America before the middle of the 17th century. He made sure that the American colonists were thoroughly indoctrinated with the principles of religious tolerance, political democracy, and social equality. The alchemists, Kabbalists, mystics, and Rosicrucians were the incisive instruments of Bacon's plan. Representatives of these groups migrated to the colonies at an early date and set up their organizations in suitable places. But perhaps what Bacon did not anticipate was that another colonization scheme was at work, one that was being directed by the providential hand of God himself. Freed from the iron grip of the Roman Catholic Church after the Protestant Reformation, and unwilling to bow to the corrupt and tyrannical Church of England, a group of Puritan separatists led by William Bradford boarded the Mayflower in September of 1620 and set out for America. These were truly courageous and pious souls, and genuine Christians adhering to biblical doctrine. When once the pilgrims reached the shores of Cape Cod, after a long and treacherous voyage, they disembarked and fell on their faces before God, making with him a covenant for themselves and their posterity. Thus, the duality in our country began. On the one hand, Rosicrucians, Masons, alchemists, Kabbalists, and mystics were coming to America to carry out the ancient Luciferian plan and build the new Atlantis, while on the other, true biblical Christians were building godly communities and living in accordance to the teachings of the Apostolic Fathers. But the influx and influence of the secret societies could not be abated, and before long, the course of the colony's future was being plotted in Masonic lodges. Even the Revolutionary War that would lead to America's independence was guided by the brethren of the mystery schools, as Tom Horn affirms in his book, Zenith, 2016. That a Rosicrucian Masonic brotherhood was involved in the American and French as well as European revolutions is indisputable today. As many as 44, though probably a lower number, of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. After the colonists had won their battle for independence, and the United States of America was born, the scope and success of Francis Bacon's colonization scheme would be showcased in the building of Washington, D.C., capital of the new Atlantis. There is perhaps no greater evidence that many of America's founders were initiates of the mystery schools than the layout, architecture, and artwork displayed in the pagan monuments of Washington, D.C. Furthermore, as if to leave a token of their intentions, the Great Seal of the United States was designed to symbolize the work they had begun, but not finished. There is a legend that in the lost Atlantis stood a great university, in which originated most of the arts and sciences of the present race. The university was in the form of an immense pyramid with many galleries and corridors, and on the top was an observatory for the study of the stars. This temple to the sciences in the old Atlantis is shadowed forth in the seal of the new Atlantis. Was it the society of the unknown philosophers, who scaled the new nation with the eternal emblems, that all the nations might know the purpose for which the new country had been founded? Benjamin Franklin was the chief representative of the mystery schools in America, and the primary orchestrator of the plan that Bacon had set into motion so many years before. I could spend a long time detailing Franklin's involvement with the occult and his unparalleled influence in both the Revolutionary War and the formulation of the government that preceded it, but I will abstain for brevity's sake. Suffice it to say, Benjamin Franklin, like his forerunner Francis Bacon, was engaged in intercourse with demons, and very possibly guided by the agents of the antediluvian world as he labored to build the new Atlantis. Franklin spoke for the order of the quest, and most of the men who worked with him in the early days of the American Revolution were also members. The plan was working out. The new Atlantis was coming into being in accordance with the program laid down by Francis Bacon 150 years earlier. The rise of American democracy was necessary to a world program. At the appointed hour, the freedom of man was publicly declared. Democracy is the banner beneath which the Luciferian agenda marches. The doctrine of Lucifer is one of enlightenment and apotheosis. It teaches that through knowledge, man can perfect himself and become like God. Luciferians believe that they are embracing the light, and indeed they are, but it is a light that leads to everlasting darkness. They seek to liberate humanity from the human condition, and yet reject utterly its singular rectification in the Lord Jesus Christ. But above all, they endeavor to reinstitute the golden age and enthrone their own philosopher king, their Ben Salem, the Son of Peace, who the Bible identifies with a different title, the Son of Perdition. Some Luciferians are overtly wicked, knowing full well with whom they have aligned themselves and against whom. However, the majority of Luciferians sincerely believe that they are members of a philosophic priesthood dedicated to the liberty of mankind. Such were many of the founding fathers of the United States of America. What they fail to realize is that the true nature of Luciferian enlightenment is liberty from the law of God and the dominion of His Anointed One. This kind of freedom is vividly illustrated in the second Psalm. Why do the nations rage and the people plot a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against His anointed, saying, Let us break their bonds in pieces and cast away their cords from us. I believe that the intentions of many of the founding fathers were noble and praiseworthy, but because of the influence of the occult, a Faustian bargain was made. The seeds of liberty that were sown into the blood-soaked soil of America were derived from the fruit of a Luciferian tree. They would indeed grant the benefits of enlightenment, religious tolerance, political democracy, social equality, and prosperity for a while. But when this tree was grown to full maturity, the fruits of its freedom would flower, and the true nature of its origin would be seen. Licentiousness, sexual depravity, pride, corruption, and every form of immorality, the fruits of liberty from the law of God. It is now apparent, nearly 400 years after Francis Bacon initiated his colonization scheme, that the new Atlantis has been successfully constructed according to the blueprint set forth in his book. America was designed to be a Christian nation on paper, but in practice it would be governed from behind the curtains by a pagan society of Solomon's house. Writer and filmmaker Christian J. Pinto elucidates. Bacon's New Atlantis has also been called the land of the Rosicrucians, and that is exactly what America has become, thanks to the secret societies. The rise of paganism in our country is no accident. It was planned from the beginning. But what is the end game for the New Atlantis? What is the prime objective? I believe it is this: to open the gates to the gods of the old Atlantis and reinstate the antediluvian old world order, the hybrid age, when the gods mingled with men. This occult plan for America, according to Madame Blavatsky, is cryptically referenced in one of the stanzas from an ancient Tibetan manuscript called the Book of Dizion. The serpents who redescended, who made peace with the fifth race, who taught and instructed it. Occultic philosophy teaches that even now, under our very eyes, the new race and races are preparing to be formed, and that it is in America that the transformation will take place, and has already silently commenced. Is it possible that the founding of the United States of America has been guided by the same plumed serpent entities that, according to tradition, founded the Maya, Aztec, and Inca civilizations? Like our own nation, these kingdoms flourished with enlightenment and knowledge until they descended into a bloodbath of paganism, despotism, and moral depravity. The serpent godmen that established these civilizations were said to have taught Christian values and are even depicted in some instances with the symbol of the cross on their garments, in their hands, and even hoisted on their backs, as in Quetzalcoatl's case. Are we, as a nation, being guided even now by the exiles of the old Atlantis to prepare the way for the coming of their progenitors in the new Atlantis? I cannot say for certain, but I do know this: the enlightenment and knowledge of Lucifer's light will always lead to death and eternal darkness. There is no political, philosophical, or spiritual concept that can deliver the human race from its wretched condition of sin and death. True enlightenment does not come from Greek philosophers, scientific discoveries, or contact with superior beings. True enlightenment is faith in the Son of God. I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. This concludes the Land of the Plumed Serpent series. For more information on the occultic roots of America's founding, read Tom Horn's superbly documented book, Zenith 2016, and watch Chris Pinto's fascinating documentary film, Secret Mysteries of America's Beginnings, The New Atlantis. Reporting for SteveQuayle.com, I'm Timothy Alberino, and that's my analysis.